parents, many of whom are watching on the internet, I believe, all around the world, parents who've played that difficult role of supporting you and not seeming to interfere, and also to all the friends present who've come to support their own friends here in this university. I'm particularly glad to be given this, and I'm extremely proud to be given this. Particularly glad to be given it in the company of Conor Macaulay, who did, as you have heard, so much for this borough and therefore for this university, and in the presence of John Locke, who was also on the board of the Theatre Royal Stratford East along with Conor, and who did so much for the founding of this university and for the wonderful place it exists in. Some of my friends have been mocking me a lot for receiving anything from a school which has computing in its title, because I am spectacularly bad at computing. But I do have some claim to fame in my family in engineering, which may surprise even some of my friends present. In 1815, my great, is that three? Yeah. Great grandfather designed and built the oldest existing train in the world, called the Puffing Billy, which is in the Science Museum. He was the one who worked out that trains needn't have, if you call them cogs on the wheels, which fitted in with cogs on the line and progressed along like that, pulled along very often, yes. Now, and he discovered that the train could stay on the track by its own weight if you had flanges on the track. Now that sounds pretty obvious now, but like all good inventions and important inventions, it's only obvious after somebody has thought of it, yes? And it would have taken Conor much longer, I think, to make the transformations in Newham, starting with transport, if my great-great-great-great-grandfather hadn't thought of that. Thank you very much for the citation in which you mentioned the change in my life that happened through the work of Joan Littlewood. There was another change that happened for me in my early days, 50 years ago actually, when I was teaching in an evening class at the technical college next door to the now Newham's Town Hall. It was East Ham Town Hall at the time. The college has disappeared now. And I was teaching English for 2 hours a week to the engineering apprentices. The principal called me in to say that he'd had a new order from the Ministry of Education whereby the engineering apprentices had to have 2 hours of English every week. There was to be no examination. It didn't matter what they did in the class, they just had to be there for 2 hours. Not a very good way to found a course or to educate people. And they were a very difficult class to control, I can tell you, under those circumstances. We were put in the converted bike sheds at the back of the college, of the brand new college, for good reason, actually, because most of them would roar around the, I suppose you call it the playground, the ground, on motorbikes, get off, and since my classroom was sunken compared to where they got off, they'd get off their bikes, climb through the window, onto the shelf in front of the window, walk across the top of the desks, and just drop into their seats for me to teach them. It was very tough, I can tell you, especially there were 60 of them at the first class in the room that was far too small, and they not only were two in a seat, they were right round the walls and behind me, and I'm trying to teach them for 2 hours. I was so terrified that I did what teachers who, when they haven't properly prepared or are frightened, often do, which is just keep talking. And I kept talking for 2 hours solidly because I didn't dare let go of control of the class, and they missed their tea break as well. There we are. But the point of the story is I then took them to the Theatre Royal Stratford East. They'd never been before to a theatre. Some of them lived half a mile away from that theatre, and they'd never been there. When I arrived, slightly late in the time I said I'd meet them, I dashed into the theatre, through the foyer, through the bar, looking for my class. And I thought, oh, damn, they've not even turned up. I went out the front to look for them again, and then I saw them. This frightened group of the same boys who I taught, normally covered in leather, and there they were in suits, white shirts, ties, hair parted, frightened because they were going to this new place, a theatre. And when they saw the show, which was one of Joan's Cockney comedies, which she always built on the realism locally, the absolute truth of the streets and the homes, they were enraptured. They kept saying, but that's just like my mum and dad. My brother talks like that. They couldn't get over what they'd seen and how it connected with them. Now that was 50 years ago. That taught me a very great deal. And I've tried to keep that in mind ever since, because the arts ought to be accessible to everybody, and we in the arts, just as you in universities have got to, the constant attention to going back to ABC of what you are doing to make sure you are connecting with the people who ought to be coming to you, and that you don't use jargon to connect with, you don't use the wrong sort of posters, you don't make it too expensive, etc. To connect and to be accessible. That is so hugely important, and it's driven my life, and I can see it's at the basis of this university. And you can imagine in the light of that, my enormous pleasure when, having been invited by your new dean, Hassan, who I think is going to actually follow Joan Littlewood's precepts and live by making changes, I trust, to see properly the nature of the university and the students there. And when I was at university, by the way, the engineering apprentices I took to the theatre, they were all white and they were all male 50 years ago, yes? Now, to see your university, and because in my day when we were at university, people would say you learn just as much from fellow students at university as you do from the staff. It's a whole experience, and indeed you do that. But speaking on Saturday to Ali Reza, who I don't believe is in this group, but I think he's graduating this afternoon, speaking to him, and he told me how, coming from Iran as he did, how much he was helped and welcomed at the university, how much he was in all sorts of details, where there was real thought had gone into accommodating people from overseas, and that he was sharing accommodation when he arrived with 5 other students, 1 Polish, 1 Italian, 1 Swedish, 1 Nigerian, 1 Irish, and they used to cook meals for each other in the evenings from their own homeland. And can you imagine, indeed he was immensely appreciative of it, what he learnt from that kind of experience, that kind of sharing. And that kind of sharing at its best is of course still going on not only throughout your university but throughout London at its best. And it's what makes London into a great city, as all the students there agreed when I was there on Saturday. We still have pockets, God knows, of racism, of course, institutional racism as well in institutions, and I'm afraid we still have institutional racism in the theatres in this country. In some of them, sometimes in ways you may not normally observe. You try and find an orchestra pit in the West End where the faces are not all white. I can't, except for musicals which transfer from the Theatre Royal Stratford East. And also in my own profession, it's still shaming that there are not enough of the positions of power of directors of theatres which are not remaining exclusively white. We've still got to work on it, we all have. But now, you are going out into the world, and my generation has given you some monstrous problems to face when you do go out into that world. We've done some good jobs in some ways in progress, but we've done badly in others. And you're going out to a world full of problems. But you are, and very often they're global problems which need extraordinary imagination and willpower, etc., to change. But I'm hoping, well, and I believe, that those changes, when they come, and sometimes you've got to be rebellious to achieve them, when they will come very likely from global universities like yours, because that's where we'll solve global problems. Thank you very much indeed.